Welcome to the land of no easy answers. I'm your host, Alex Knight, joined by Master of Psychology, Kristin Rumohr.
Hello.
And her unwitting test subject over in the other corner, Stewart.
What? Ooh.
Thanks for joining us on this blistering, warm day here. We're going to talk about the 4-day work week. This comes to us from an article here on the CBC about a 4-day work week pilot that was very successful in, I believe it was Iceland? Yeah.
Finland.
And it says about 2,500 workers, more than 1% of the country's workforce, worked between 35 and 36 hours a week, as opposed to the standard 40, with no reduction in pay. They said the results were hugely positive. Workers from all sorts of areas of the public sector are incredibly happy with their work-life balance, spending more time with their families, doing more kinds of extracurricular activities. So we all know, I mean, look, we're all stressed out. Many of us work long hours. If you work in the corporate world, if you're someone that feels compelled to work your way up the corporate ladder, someone like me that's done that many times. I've for many years put in more than 40 hours a week, and sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people that you work for don't see that and don't necessarily appreciate it. And it's very easy to get burnt out. And, we could do a whole episode on burnout as an issue because it is kind of an epidemic in the corporate world. A lot of us do work long hours. So I see a lot of benefits to this. I'm all for a reduced work hour or reduced work week. If you look at how different cultures work too, people in other countries have longer breaks. They have siestas. They have very different work-life balance. And I think that's going to be kind of the overarching theme here today is about how do you balance things? And also, how realistic is a 4-day work week in this country, right? That's kind of, I think, challenging to implement for a lot of employers because we're so used to doing the 5-day work week, 40 hours a week or more, and I think it would be a very difficult transition.
I don't think it would be difficult.
And it would be
it would be easy, actually.
Yeah,
we just need to
fact,
recognize that
absolutely.
this doesn't work, right? And like you said, Alex, you just look at other cultures as a prime example, other countries that are doing it with no reduction in productivity. In fact, there's higher levels of productivity.
Yeah.
So we just need to do away with this, because this is the way it is mentality.
Absolutely.
Right? And kind of where our value system lies in this whole first one in, last one out, right? That's what you're taught to believe in the corporate world anyway. Yeah. That's what pays off and how you get promoted. So I think it'd be quite simple. Let's just flip that from the hours you're putting in to the actual productivity you're putting out. That's where the emphasis is.
Mm-hmm. I think you see a lot of that, we've seen a lot of it over the last 6 months. There has been a change and there's been pushback from a lot of employees as a lot of us during the pandemic have had to, rethink how we actually operate in these jobs, working from home, making sure you have the right environment to work in, making sure that you have a good camera and a microphone now because we're doing meetings via Zoom. This is kind of the new normal now. A lot of people that are being asked to go back to the office and more so in the next couple months of September is actually the goal of a lot of companies to bring the workforce back as much as possible. But you're seeing pushback now from a lot of employees that realize they could actually do their jobs remotely, and it's mostly the commute, right? And so what does that do to people that can work from home? It means that we now no longer need to live in the city center. We can live in the middle of nowhere as long as we have good internet, as long as we have the equipment to do our jobs. Mm-hmm. But then it also comes down to work-life balance, and I think a lot of companies also have, companies that were traditionally not allowing employees to work from home at all, I think have a hard time keeping tabs on individual productivity, and they're worried about, well, this person's going to be distracted. They're not going to be, the output is not going to be the same. They're not going to be doing their job properly. And that clearly is just flat out not the case in a lot of companies.
Well, I think the
pandemic, the pandemic has proven that to be not true, right? I mean, I think pretty much every company that's given their employees opportunities to work from home have found that they've been at least as productive as they were when they were in the office. I mean, yeah.
There have been some issues with companies trying to keep a tight rein on employees working from home, though, right? Because when they're used to this 8 hours tethered to their desk, and now you've got issues like you expecting employees to be constantly available because they're working from home, right? So if you send this email at 9 p.m., you should be jumping on that straight away.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to kind of strike this balance between the individual autonomy of working from home and being productive at the time that you feel being productive, and then being able to turn and switch off entirely.
Yeah. Well, and this article even says through this pilot program that they did that Autonomy and the association found employees exhibited greater well-being, improved work-life balance, and better cooperative spirit in the workplace, all while maintaining existing standards of performance and productivity.
Well, and from an employee standpoint, wouldn't it just feel better for you working for this company that you feel like they trust you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Enough to be just like, no, go do your thing. We trust you. You'll get it done. Right. And we'll talk if there's issues. Right. And that just seems like something that as an employee and as an employer, that it would be beneficial on both ends where you've employed them to do the job. And if you don't trust them to do the job, then why are you keeping them around, whether they're in the office or not? Right. If they're not doing the job, well, you should probably find someone else. Hovering over top of them probably isn't going to help the situation. And I think that hopefully is one of the lessons that have been learned by companies is that if you get the right people, you don't need to have them sitting right there so you can walk over every 5 minutes and go, are you doing your job? Right? Because you've hired people that are there to do their job, and they're going to do their job, and they're going to do their best job and give it to you. Right. And
I argue that you give people that freedom, they will just naturally, I think it's human instinct, right, to then just do the best job that you can do for yourself, because you obviously get feedback from that, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the problems lie when you feel kind of that oppressiveness, like you said, people standing over your shoulder and micromanaging every little thing you do. Well, then it's natural to kind of either rebel or shut down.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I think a mentorship thing would probably be more handy than like the issue is that, a lot of people might take advantage of that situation, right? Due to whatever circumstances are going on outside of, right? They may not feel the same commitment to, quality that others do, right? And I think that's one of the things that, the company could foster within, and just be able to, bring out the best in people instead of, finding those people and instead of firing them or just being like, we don't want to deal with this guy anymore, finding ways of moving forward. And how can we, and if it turns out that there's just no way of you being able to mesh your ideals, then feel free to part ways. But I think a lot of this comes from this idea that, again, you have to crack the whip on people or else they'll never do anything. And I just don't know that that's really the case. And it really, I don't think ever has been. It's more just the fact that, if you feel like you're an indentured servant.
What I find fascinating, too, from this pilot program is they said that employees were less likely to suffer from workplace stress and anxiety and depression and burnout. And now, as a result of that, they worked harder and took fewer sick days. Imagine that. Also, you know what? The morning commute to jobs, the average person drives an hour each way to work. A lot of us don't live in the city center where the job is, right? A lot of us live in suburbs. And so, you got to get in a car, you got to get on transit, and it takes time, and you got to deal. And then again, going to the stress thing, you're sitting in a car, you're getting pissed off, you've got gridlock to deal with, you got traffic and accidents. I mean, all that. By the time you get to the office, you're just like, just worked up from the commute, right? And how does that impact?
We were talking about that this morning.
How does that impact the job? And clearly
we were
does.
talking about the construction traffic on the way and just, how
I know
it's literally outside my front door.
I know it affects me because every time I get to work, I'm always talking about it with coworkers. I'm always talking about the number one highway is fucked up again. It's backed up. Couldn't get on the bridge. It was taking forever. Like by the time I get to work, I'm really annoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're starting off our days as a giant ball of anxiety.
That's right.
And that's just no way to start a workday productively. If you already have to, come to work and unwind from being just okay, I guess I can answer an email now. I mean, without blowing up on a customer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there are days where it annoys me to no end, where I sometimes feel like I just wish I could get out of my car and walk away and push a button on a remote and the car explodes and I never want to deal with it again.
I wish more for a non-lethal method of marking their car. Paintballs would probably work. Just a little ding so that they knew that they've done something that somebody felt worth dinging them for.
I need
when they go for their insurance, if their car is covered in dings, then the insurance company knows that there's probably something going on, right? Like, why does this car have 10,000 dings all over it?
But here's the thing, because that person who's pissing you off, whose car you want to explode or shoot up with paintball, they're going through the exact same thing you're going through, right? So it's just this spillover effect of like, okay, you're stressed out from the minute you leave your house. I'm stressed out from the minute I leave my house, right? And you happen to cut me off today, so therefore you're an asshole and deserve to be punished, right? So it's instead of blaming the individual person, right? Let's go back, as we always do. Where does this stem from?
Exactly.
Right? And could it be the structure that we've put in place is flawed?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I always say it's why is there more of an emphasis on more cars instead of better drivers? Really? Like, seriously? Like, that's a legitimate question.
Of course.
Like, to get to really the root of the issue here, how many more cars do we pump out? And how many, actual retesting of licenses do we do? How much, like, if they've had 10 accidents in a year, why do we have no recourse to do something to their license or to make them retest themselves again or to go through any of these processes that are meant to remove these kind of issues? It seems kind of odd to me that we just seem to operate under different rule books on the road.
Yeah, and the other thing that I want to talk about is, does the 8-hour workday even make sense? Because are we actually truly productive for that 8 hours?
No, absolutely not. There's so much research on it that the average person is productive for maybe like 2 to 4 hours a day, right? That's it. That's when we're at our peak output, right? You can produce more over, longer periods of time, but the quality of that production is arguably going to be less.
Got it.
See, and I do still question whether that's just in the context of 9 to 5, or whether that is like if you were given free reign to do your work over the course of any time during the day and you had 8 hours worth of work to do, whether you were still only technically productive for that 2 or 4, whether it's just because a lot of people just aren't productive first thing in the morning, and it's only because we're kind of just catching that window of 9 to 5 instead of actually looking at the entirety of time that people could be productive and figuring out whether, right?
Yeah, it normally does come in little spurts,
Yeah, exactly.
But like you brought up a good point that people are productive at different times of day, and we've structured this society that means it needs to be within these confines, right? So whoever came up with that was obviously a morning person that was productive. But our society kind of like shits on night owls, like
it does.
Right?
Which is odd in this global society now where Tokyo isn't on our time at all. Right? So the idea that you can conduct worldwide business on a 9 to 5 schedule only within Canada and United States, and everybody else just has to deal with that just seems right. Like, so again, it seems like something that, would be beneficial for us in so many ways to restructure this whole system so that it would be more of a globally accepted kind of thing, that we might all be able to work together instead of all trying to structure into this, rigid thing that we've built.
Yeah, I think part of the problem too, and we talked about this on a past episode about the underdeveloped teenage brain too. One of the things you pointed out, Aaron, about what we know about how productive kids are or not productive in the morning. We're forcing young people, to get up at these early hours of the morning when they're actually just not designed really to operate properly then. And so again, it always comes back to, we're trying to create this structure that doesn't really work all that well for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I think it was Einstein who used the analogy, if you're trying to teach a fish to fly, you can't really shit on the fish for not being able to fly. I'm paraphrasing, right? But but I mean, that's the thing. Like if these people just aren't wired to be able to do that at this point in their life, then shitting all over them for not doing it just seems counterintuitive, you know? Now you're shitting on them for who they are, right? And then you're, again, creating people that now believe that that's just who I am, I guess, right? Like, I guess I'll just never be productive in terms of society's, again, rigid norms of what we're doing. You know, and so
let's look at it. I want to look at it from the other side too, from the business perspective. If you have a workforce working remotely too, I understand like respecting people's time, that, you know, maybe some people are going to be more productive at night, but also that may not work necessarily all that well, because if you have to have meetings, I mean, you have to find a time in the day where you can get everyone together. And so just because one person only works well at night, you're not going to have a meeting at 10 p.m. just because that's their time that works.
I mean, sometimes compromises are absolutely going to be necessary. That's just part of working as a team and in a group, right? But for the majority of work, I think you can split it up according to what each individual is good at and what time they're productive.
Yeah. See, and that's where, again, I was going to point out, like, I'm in construction, and a lot of this, like, changing around of times doesn't really work great in a construction aspect. Like, as we get hotter, construction is really going to have to start making some changes, right? Like, forcing guys to go out and work in plus 45 is just not going to be, right? Like, I think they shut everything down at about 30, and we're going to start seeing a lot more of those, you know?
Or like overnight construction.
And that's the thing.
Are they actually doing
it? We may need to start shifting to that, but, you know, again, from construction, this has not been a shift that's occurred. And I'm listening to the guys working outside right now, and it's 30 degrees, 27 degrees out there right now. Okay. Already, I think.
And are they actually
1 o'clock?
Do they actually shut down construction sites at when it hits 30?
That's when it gets to an extreme heat. They're supposed to. WorkSafe says by law that at a certain temperature they're supposed to either put in place, you know, restrictions on the work that they are doing, or right. Like there's laws in place to keep people from literally fucking dying. Right. Like if you're working on a roof in 45-degree heat, there's just no way you're not going to pass out. Well,
above 35, right? We know above 35 degrees. We talked about this on the climate episode that, you know, if the humidity gets to a certain point where you're sweating and the sweat isn't evaporating, your body isn't able to cool itself and regulate temperature properly. Right.
Yeah. And so, you know, in a lot of places, they take time off over the winter because the conditions get to the point where they can't, you know, build properly, or they have to kind of hoard everything off so people can work inside over the winter. But now in the summertime, we're going to have to start making provisions for the heat, where we might actually have to start providing cooling spaces for workers. We might actually have to start thinking about ways to, you know, integrate this, whether it might be changing our work hours so that you start now at 1 o'clock and you can get a couple of hours, you know, before it starts to get really, you know, before it cools down at least, and you can work, or shift to an earlier time. Some of these guys might be okay starting at 2 a.m. to actually get some, you know, productive time before 10 o'clock rolls around and the heat gets too much. Right. But that's the kind of thing where, again, in a construction aspect, right, like as long as there's somebody there working, this can be worked around. Right. Like I believe the Chinese have been constructing buildings at a breakneck pace where they do 24-hour shifts. Right. Ooh, where they just have somebody where they literally are just pouring concrete 24/7. It's
crazy.
Right. Man. And they can put up basically a 50-story building in 4 weeks, something stupid. Like, because they build all the parts off site, they just have concrete pouring 24/7, building the walls and and then they just stack it on top of each other.
You don't mean one person working 24 hours, right? You just mean that there's someone working 24 hours.
But that's exactly, it's shifting. But that's where, again, like some people are working from the, 8 to 9, or, then they just break up the shift. So that, again, there's always somebody, and then they can make it so, because they have such a large space in this one thing, they can just have shifts of different people coming in at all times, right? Let alone if you need the specialists to show up at a certain time, you can have them scheduled around the time when they need to show up and blah, 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 right? Like there's lots of ways that you can structure things to have this 24-hour schedule. And while that's not necessarily great for people either, and I'm not necessarily advocating for a communist regime type, structure whether, you ask the question of whether that's one person, it might be at times under certain regimes, but the idea is more to just have that, they said 36 hours basically. It wasn't a 40-hour work week anymore. Then when they shifted to the four-day work week, they were doing 36 hours, you said?
I believe.
Yeah. So doing 9-hour days, 4 days a week, I think is basically what that would.
I could handle that. I don't think I would. I really don't think I would mind that. I totally buy into.
I have done that for a while, and it was the best thing ever, right? Like having a Monday or a Friday off was just the best shit ever, right? Because working from having come from 9 to 5 or like 7 to 3, basically construction time, yay, to be able to go and do something on a weekday at the bank or do any of this stuff that, requires, like all of these other places or spaces are working in a 9 to 5 environment, but you're tied up in this 9 to 5 environment and no chance to get to actually go and do any of this stuff, right?
And you kind of need that extra day just to unwind,
absolutely,
right? Because a lot of people that have the standard 2 days off, Saturday, Sunday, your first day off is usually just recovering,
or cleaning up.
Like, yeah, most people I know, it's one whole day.
And then you're
just
fully
that,
relaxed
right?
the
You
day
sleep
after
in,
that, and then it's like, well, and then I gotta go.
What do you mean? I got
again.
podcast. Right? Like that's the thing. Like there is, and if you got kids, there's no day off. Right? Like you can't. There just isn't. And so that's the thing. So having that extra day of just having that time to that sets an extra day for relaxing. Right? Like you said, it's if those 2 days are already tied up. Having that extra day is just right. And while it will eventually get tied up, it's again having that freedom, even just that extra
away
space.
From this, like having to then go back, right? Because you have these 2 days, and by the time you finally feel like, okay, I'm finished with work now, I'm shut off, you're right back at it again.
Yeah. And that's where even doing the 35-36 with the option of adding an extra 4 hours or something of extra time, right? Like that's where, if something comes up on Friday and I needed to send off an email or do whatever to deal with something, I wouldn't feel so, oh my God, right? Where it would be more like, I can send that quick email because I've got this extra time where it's me time and I get to actually do something that's, that would be a quantifiable thing that I could say I did this for the company. Right? Versus I had to do this, and I think that would make a big difference in employees, standards of living, just being able to feel like you're valued in this company, right? Where they're just giving you that free time. If there's nothing for you to do that 4 or 5 hours, take it, man. We don't care.
Yeah.
Right. Like
and that's such an important thing you just brought up is feeling valued, right? Because that's the structure that we've kind of created now is you're not valued, right? You just show up, you do your work, you don't complain. You actually are supposed to work harder than you're even contracted to do, right? So a lot of places, you're 9 to 5, but if you're not showing up by 8 and you're leaving before 6, then you're not going to get that promotion.
And they call that growth.
Yeah. So I think, value is huge. And this is a great way, I think, for employers to show value to their employees by, hey, we trust you, right? We trust you enough that you can do this work in 4 hours. We value that you need your own time for your own personal growth and recovery, because that will then be a value to us. It kind of works in a circle, right? Happy employees tend to produce better, as this study showed us, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's where, like you said, if we're only getting 2 or 3 hours worth of productive time in the office anyway, well, what?
Yeah, why are we here?
What were you doing there? Yeah,
why are we still here?
I had a lot of times, like when I was doing computer sales, it was that same thing where we'd just kind of, standing around. No customers were in for the first couple hours or so during the day. All the emails were sent. Everything was caught up. There's nothing really to clean because there's a crew that takes care of that. We could organize stuff, but for the most part, we were just doing busy work just to look like we were doing something. And a lot of that translates into bored employees that don't really feel valued because why am I standing here if I'm not doing anything worth value? Right? And so, again, a lot of it just comes down to, why not just make those, shift the times a little bit so that the times when people are coming in, you got the extras, shifting around, A lot of it's moved online, move a lot of those people who weren't, necessarily feeling valued, shift them into doing some online work, right? Where they could be placing orders or taking care of and fulfillment. And, there's all sorts of different places that companies can move people into and different shifts that can be made within the company that, like, you made the point in the beginning that it was this really difficult thing for people to implement. And it really kind of isn't, right? It only is if you make it that, right? And I get a lot of company policies are very strict and have these rules that you got to blah, blah, blah. But, you have the power to change this.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I get it because it threatens kind of the previous generation who was, they built their livelihood on this notion that, you get in, you work hard and you get rewarded for it. Right. Yeah. So from their perspective, it's hard to understand.
But seeing
us, like the millennial generation where we're burning out, we're not getting the same amount of pay for more work. We have no options for climbing up the ladder compared to what the previous generation had. Yeah. Right. So I get both sides just aren't communicating or understanding each other.
Well, so you illustrate a point there that I get really uptight about older generations for, if they're all just like, well, I never had access to that. Why should I just, pay for this to happen for everyone else? And I just have to go, right? Like you're literally being upset because things are better now than they were for you. And you're pissed off at us for having access to things that were better than what you had instead of being fucking proud of having built that for us. Right? Like you're all upset because people might get a universal basic income because I never had access and I had to bust my ass. And I'm like, yes, I know, but that was part of the construct that we're now trying to
But you could also work for minimum wage and buy a house off that, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing.
Not a thing now.
And that's the problem, right? Like, again, like if you're getting after the younger generations because they have access to things that you didn't, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. That's just not, it's not an argument. It's just not. Right.
No.
And like if that's the source of your bitterness and the reason why you're standing in the way of the younger generation having, say, free schooling. Right. There's real pushback to taking, to the tuition recovery that the Biden administration is doing right now, where he's basically just forgiving a whole whack load of student loans. Just you guys just go work. Right. And the idea is that, again, this generation didn't have that. So it supposedly takes something away from them that this generation now has it. And that's the problem here. We need to start addressing that mentality of, this scarcity thing. Well, it must be taking something away from someone else for them to have it. And it's not true. It was always there to begin with. We're just reallocating the resources to better benefit those people that really needed that benefit. Hopefully. With any luck, and that again, if you're against that kind of thing, I have to say sorry, but that's just what we need to be doing at this point, right? There needs to be a redistribution of things that's more fair for everybody, because otherwise this just falls into despair, and I can't believe that that's where we're going to just let this end.
I don't think any existing company has any reason to change unless every person, every employee suddenly bands to, if they all band together and push back, because it would have to come from the top down. Like that's like a CEO thing. Like the CEO has to want to make that change. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. Like I said,
but again, like the point is that it really is just of benefit to the company. Right, like it keeps getting framed as this big change, and they have to make all this.
But they don't see it that way. They have to.
But they do. And it's more just that they've been sold on this idea that, again, it's the same thing like I was illustrating, that they didn't have it, so why should you?
I think a lot of what they see is all they see is people are going to work less hours and I'm going to pay them the exact same amount. That's all they see.
Yeah.
Right? I'm getting less for the same amount of money. That's all they see.
Yeah. But arguably they'd be getting more.
Well,
that's, yeah,
Yeah.
And so how
But
do
I get it. We've based our worth off of, an hourly work output.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be just based on the hours. Your worth is based on what you produce.
I think that the only way to make change is there needs to be a movement. Like I'm talking a large cultural, societal shift. Everybody has to, and I feel like a little bit of that is happening now with the pandemic, as a lot of people have had to shift to working from home, and a lot of people don't want to go back to the office now. They're actually fighting this. There are lots of people fighting this. So I feel like that we're sort of starting to see a little bit of that, but I think there needs to be like a huge cultural shift to change our mindsets.
Well, and luckily this, big thing called the pandemic just swept through. So it feels like we've already had sweeping cultural shifts, and the goal now is just to kind of ride that wave.
Yeah.
With any luck, right? That we've hopefully identified some of the issues, and we now have identified strategies to help us to move forward.
Yeah.
So at this point, it's just a matter of, basically selling the message and implementation. Right.
And we're kind of at like the precipice right now, and it's a dangerous point too. It scares me a little bit that we're too eager to get back to exactly how it was. Like we started making these shifts, but it was like
because that worked so fucking well before, right?
Yeah. But you can see it happening, right? Like people are just falling right back into it when it's like, we were so close, right? Like we were these issues were starting to come out. And like you said, Aaron, we need to keep riding this wave, right? Just because we can fall back into what we knew does not mean that that is the right way going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Again, like I think that we've actually been able to somewhat address these things, and let alone that this was hopefully a pilot project for a lot of places to be able to just try this thing out that would have been inconceivable beforehand.
I'm glad these pilot programs are being done, and there needs to be more research into this and more people experimenting with this, because without like once I think you have the data that proves this, which obviously this pilot program does show. But if we see more of that, I think it will be easier for people to buy into, okay, well, the data actually shows that we can actually do this. We can accomplish better work. We can have better work-life balance. We can reduce stress levels, and everything is going to be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be better. Yeah. In fact, right? Like that's the thing, not just fine, but better for everybody. Like your people will be happier, your company will be happier, they'll be more productive, they'll be more proud to work for your company, which will give you better results in every indication that you could imagine, right? I mean, again, just feeling valued by a company is invaluable.
Well, do you want your employees trash talking you and saying how horrible you are, or would you like your employees to be praising you and, this is an awesome company to work for? That's only going to benefit you in the long run.
Exactly. Well, that benefits the organization, because then, as you need to acquire new talent, you have that reputation that's like a place people want to go to work, right?
Yeah.
So
employees are salespeople for your company.
They are indeed.
And that's the thing, like even down to the janitor of the place, he's talking to other people around him about this company.
Yeah.
Word of mouth. And if he's proud to work for them, you'd be surprised at the people that will hear about that. Again, down to the lowest person that happens to be, employed at your company. And if you're proud to have them work for you, you should show it.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think we're going to see, as time goes on here, I think we're going to see more and more people, people that are in the middle of negotiating, salaries as they get hired at new companies. I think this is going to be a big part of it. I think a lot of people will at least want to have the option to work from home a couple days, 2-3 days a week at least, right? That's becoming more and more popular now with a lot of people, and people. I think people just need to demand it, and if we expect this as like a baseline thing, I think companies will just have to capitulate. They will have to, and that's already happening right now, because a lot of people just don't want to go back to how it was before. They just don't. Right.
Well, and that's the problem that a lot of companies have been having, is rehiring people back to come into offices. Yeah. And apparently that's been a real problem for us. Just people are just going, I don't want to do that anymore. Right?
And a lot of companies, it's nice to have perks like, free food, cafeteria, tennis courts, all that kind of stuff like that, that stuff that Google or a Microsoft campus or an Apple campus would help. But honestly, a lot of people would happily trade that. In fact, actually, I read a study that a lot of people would happily take a 10% pay cut if they just could not deal with fucking traffic every day. That's hugely valuable.
Easy. Minimum 10%. Right? Yeah. Like I used to do 1.5 hour long commute both ways to get to work.
That's a big time suck.
It was brutal, right? And it was just what I told myself I had to do at the time, right? Yeah. And it was just such a, by the time you get home, what do you want me to do?
Right.
Right? Like,
yeah, on a good day, I can get to work in about, I would say 40 minutes or so. On a bad day, 50 minutes to an hour. And like, I'm right on the cusp, right on the verge of, like, if it was any longer than that, there is no way I would want to work at that company because it's just too far.
And that was
far. I don't want to be in my car.
I came to eventually as well, right? Where it was one of those things where if you could get out of the place at like 4:15, you'd beat traffic by half an hour, right? But if you had to stay till 4:30, you're fucked. Yeah. Right.
Well, I finish at 6 o'clock most days, and it's still bad. It's really bad in this city.
Well, this was Edmonton, so it was even, I don't know if better, but not different.
Yeah. Well, I think that is pretty much all there is to say about this subject.
Oh,
so we just need to go out there.
Solved it. Thank God.
We just need to go out there and say something and fight back. If you have been pressured to come back to the office, you got to speak up. Try to negotiate. See if you with your employer. See if you can maybe even work 1-2 days a week, something from home. Right? Because that is going to reduce your stress levels. Even 1 or 2 days a week, just not having to deal with that commute makes a massive difference. And,
so Alex,
the other thing...
So would we be able to do these from outside of our cells at some point then? Or
outside of our cells?
Yeah, do we get to leave here? Or
are you
gonna let us leave?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you didn't know you could do that?
Do we get a day pass?
Absolutely. There was always a day pass available. I thought you were using it. So it's, I get it. It's hard to create work-life balance at home when if you're living with other people, you have family, you have kids, you do have distractions. There is a certain level of distraction, but I firmly believe that you can overcome that. You just need to find a space, create a little space, a little alcove somewhere in your house where you can just go away for a while and get some solid work done. It is doable. You just need to make it happen. Have you guys, either of you, I don't know if you've ever, I guess Aaron, you haven't because you've done a lot of construction. You need to be out there. Have you ever, either of you, done jobs where you were able to work from home or no?
Well, that's what I'm moving into right now. And that's right. Like that's where I'm currently training on a basically work from home kind of thing where I'm trying to get out of the carpentry thing.
So we're doing a little bit of that and trying to move towards doing that full time.
Yeah, basically.
Awesome.
Well, and that's where, right? Like just the whole idea of going back to that just doesn't seem feasible anymore. Right. So trying something different.
Yeah. I find myself so busy at work. Sometimes people joke that I need like a Bluetooth headset so I can take phone calls in the bathroom. And I kind of laugh at that and
gross.
Go,
No,
that's how you get customers.
That's If I hear people talking to me while in the bathroom, I hang up. I'm not. No, that's good.
You don't know what that echo is.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
There's one person I work with who's just notorious for if he couldn't find you, he would knock on the bathroom door. Are you in there, brother? I got a customer here. I'm like, yeah, I'm in the fucking washroom. Kindly fuck off. It's like, yeah, okay, well, he really wants to talk to you. I'm like, yeah, I don't fucking care.
Bring him in. Don't in here.
Don't talk. I'm not having a conversation through the bathroom door.
What? Come on. No, do it. Just hand him the ordering book. There you go. Right, just pass it over top of. He can just circle what he wants, and you just pass it underneath the door. Isn't that?
Oh, it's so awkward. So awkward.
What do you mean? Nothing awkward about that at all. Yeah. You're just pooping. Everybody poops, man.
Everybody poops. Exactly. All right. Well, thank you for watching the show. If you have been watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet, please make sure you do that. We release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. If there is a topic suggestion that you'd like to pass along, please drop that in the comments below. We also have audio versions of this podcast available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn and Stitcher, and Amazon, and wherever you find your podcasts. You can reach out to us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It's at the Subvert Pod, and go to thesubvertpodcast.com where you'll find a contact form. You can send us feedback via email as well, and subscribe to our blog. That's all the time we have for today, but remember before you go that we're all fucked up. So let's be fucked up together. Bye.